Mothers of victims of Colombia's extrajudicial executions rally calling for justice. South Sudan's president dissolves parliament. And Israeli security forces continue with violent crackdown against Palestinian protesters. Hello and welcome to teleSUR. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez in Quito, Ecuador, and this is from the South. We begin in Colombia, where mothers of victims of extrajudicial executions have gathered in Bogota, waving squares of cloth representing the thousands of disappeared people. According to a special court's report, Colombia's military carried out at least 6,400 extrajudicial killings and presented them as combat deaths between 2002 and 2008, a number significantly higher than previously estimated. Until last year, the Public Prosecutor's Office had only acknowledged 2,249 executions of civilians between 1988 and 2014, the majority of which were carried out between 2006 and 2008 during the presidency of Álvaro Uribe, the political mentor of current President Iván Duque. The mothers of the victims have joined by feminist groups as part of ongoing protests against the government of President Iván Duque, which began on April 28.
I am with the mothers who have just lost their children today because we have already lost them and we know what such great pain is. Today I am here for my son, for Eduardo Garzón, because he is dead, but I am his voice. I am his steps, I am his hands. I don't want any more bloodshed. I don't want it.
Still in Colombia, a large group of cannabis enthusiasts and users have rallied demanding the decriminalization of marijuana in the city of Medellin, where protesters promote the recreational use of marijuana in the country. Protesters also voiced their support for the nationwide demonstrations against President Iván Duque's government. Triggered by a now abandoned tax reform, the demonstrations have drawn thousands of Colombians to the streets, venting their anger over poverty, inequality, and the government's brutal attacks on the protesters. Reports of police abuses, sexual violence, and disappearance have only fueled further unrest.
I think it is important that the community is present here, because the government has filed us with prohibitions over time, saying that marijuana is bad and that it makes us more violent. And here we are demonstrated that we can march peacefully and that we stand by the strike. We also do not want them to pass the tax reform.
Hundreds in Puerto Rico have mourned at the funeral of Keishla Rodriguez, who is believed to have been murdered by her lover, boxer Felix Verdejo. The 27-year-old Rodriguez was pregnant when she was killed and was reported missing a week ago. Her body was identified on Sunday via dental records. A grand jury on Thursday involved Verdejo in the killing of his pregnant lover, a case potentially eligible for the death penalty. Authorities, based on testimony from an identified witness, accused Verdejo of punching Rodriguez in the face, injecting her with an unidentified substance, biting her arms and feet with a wire, tying a block to her, and then throwing her off a bridge last Thursday.
We are sad because of this, because she was a very quiet girl, and she was always kind to everyone, always leaving home to work and back home, taking the dogs for a walk, quiet, always at home.
It hurt us. I have 5 children, and we all support Keishla and her family, and support every woman who has suffered like this in Puerto Rico. Their mothers and the mother of the one involved in Keishla's death too. But who knows who is responsible? It is unknown, but to the one who watches up above us, we are in prayer.
Brazil has lifted restrictions on the opening hours for Rio de Janeiro's bars and restaurants, despite high coronavirus rates and vaccine shortages. Bars and restaurants may open until 11 p.m. with live music permitted, and concert halls can operate at 40% capacity. Beaches, parks, and waterfalls will now be open to the public throughout the week. The decision comes one day after the state of Rio de Janeiro registered a record of 9,185 COVID-19 cases in 24 hours, and with vaccines on hold due to a lack of shots. But Rio's mayor, Eduardo Paes, claims that the recent daily case record was a result of a backlog in reporting.
I think we're not ready to do this. There are many people dying every day. and even though it's decreasing, it's still a very large number. We are not safe yet. Vaccination is slow too.
Protesters have held a vigil in the Mexican capital demanding justice for the 25 people killed when an elevated metro line came crashing down. The demonstrations converged on the site of the accident, where they paid tribute to the victims with candles and flowers. Some minor scuffles broke out with the police, who tried to prevent the protesters from approaching the scene of the tragedy. The metro line, which partially collapsed last Monday, has been plagued by a series of problems since it was inaugurated in 2012. Mexico City Mayor Claudia Sheinbaum faces questions about whether the network has been properly maintained since she took office in 2018. Foreign Minister Marcelo Ebrard is also criticized as he oversaw the development of the line involved in the crash in his former position as Mexico City Mayor.
What happened is negligence because of corruption. It is not a natural disaster. It is something caused by those who made this happen.
More news in a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back. South Sudan's President Salva Kiir has dissolved parliament, paving a way for lawmakers from opposing sides to be appointed under the 2018 peace accord. President Kiir announced the move on television on Saturday, but no date has been set so far as to when the new parliament will begin working. Almost a quarter of the MPs will come from the party of President Kiir's former rival, Riek Machar, according to the 2018 deal. The accord saw an end to a 5-year civil war that left almost 400,000 people dead and 4 million displaced. The President of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the current head of the African Union, Felix Tshisekedi, has visited Sudan for talks on the disputed Nile Dam project. The DRC president met with Egyptian and Sudanese officials as they relaunched negotiations over Ethiopia's dispute dam on the Nile River's main tributary. Egypt and Sudan argued that Ethiopia's plan to build the dam will affect regional water supplies, while Ethiopia says the dam will provide much-needed power supplies in its country. Negotiations on the dam have reached a deadlock several times as the three countries failed to reach an agreement. Fighting has resumed in Ethiopia's Tigray region between rebels and the government. Sporadic shelling could be heard north of the town of Agula. The Egyptian military has blocked the north road to food aid convoys for the UN World Food Programme, including Doctors Without Borders and World Vision. The head of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church has criticized these actions, saying he believed it was a genocide. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's government said it was deeply shocked by the deaths of civilians, blaming the former Tigray leaders and claiming normality was returning in the region. It has also denied widespread profile and targeting of Tigrayans. About 30 abducted Nigerian students have been reunited with their families 2 months after being kidnapped by heavily armed gunmen. The abduction of students from a college in Kanduta State in March was one of a series of mass kidnappings to hit schools and universities in Nigeria since late last year. 10 of the 39 students initially kidnapped were found by security forces in the weeks following the attack, but the whereabouts of the remaining 29 have been uncertain. The recent mass kidnappings have prompted 6 northern Nigerian states to shut public schools to prevent further attacks on students.
If I see rain is coming, I started thinking of how are they doing the bush. When it is night, I don't know how they are sleeping or eating. If I want to drink water, I'm thinking of them. But I give God the glory. God has done it for us. God has done it for us. A wonderful thing. He brought our children back.
Iraqi protesters have blocked roads in the city of Karbala, calling for justice following the murder of a prominent civil activist. Protesters demanded authorities to reveal the killers' identities of renowned activist Ihaf al-Wasni, who was shot by unknown men overnight outside his home. Al-Wasni was a leading figure of the October protests against the government in the city. His funeral was held on Sunday morning.
We asked the police chief to reveal the identity of the killers of the activist Ihab al-Wasni, who has been demonstrating since 2015 until today for the right of the Iraqi people. Why was he killed during the month of Ramadan?
We hold the responsibility to the governor of Karbala, the police chief, and the commander of security operations. And if they don't want to bear this responsibility, then they have to reveal who is the killer. Otherwise, they are the ones responsible for the assassination.
At least 50 people, many of them children, had been killed in a bomb attack in Afghanistan's capital, Kabul. The bomb exploded near a school in a Shiite district of West Kabul, killing at least 50 people, many of them young students, and injuring some 100 others. Outside the hospital where the victims were taken, dozens of people lined up to donate blood, while family members checked casualty lists posted on the walls. The Taliban condemned the attack, apparently aimed at civilians, and denied any responsibility, instead blaming the Islamic State group.
There was a lot of casualties. There were a few male victims, but most of them were female school students. The victims were female school students. The bodies were everywhere, and some of the bodies were missing heads.
Unfortunately, during the time when the school students were coming out of school, a powerful explosion happened, and a large number of our children were wounded. And you can see that all the hospitals are full of victims.
We have more stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. Around 90 people have been injured as Israeli police cracks down on Palestinian protesters in annexed East Jerusalem. Police say they dispersed the rally in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, where demonstrators had thrown stones at security forces during a protest over an eviction threat against Palestinian families. Several countries, including Russia, have voiced deep concern with Israel's move to continue the expropriation of land and property in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem, calling it a violation of international law. Members of the Follow-Up Committee for the National and Islamic Factions have gathered in Gaza City to show their support for Palestinian protesters in the annexed East Jerusalem. On Saturday night, thousands of Palestinians packed Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, Islam's third holy site, which Jews refer as the Temple Mount, to hold special Ramadan prayers. Islamist groups, including the Hamas, have vowed to defend the Palestinian cause, while other Arab and Muslim countries have also joined the condemnation against Israeli actions and have described the violence as a barbaric attacks.
We assure the Islamic Jihad and the resistance movement will not leave our people in the city of Jerusalem. The Gaza resistance has openly announced its position in regards to this confusion act from the part of the Zionist enemy and this exploding anger of the youth of Gaza against settlers of Gaza.
Spain has lifted the state of emergency in place since October to fight the pandemic, allowing people to travel between regions. However, regions can still restrict opening hours and impose capacity limits in bars and restaurants. They can also seek court approval for stricter measures, such as reimposing curfews, controlling the number of people allowed at home gatherings, or extending a ban on internal travel. Spain is one of the hardest hit nations in Europe, with nearly 79,000 deaths and 3.5 million infections. Various European Union leaders have called on the United States to lift its ban on vaccine exports before patent waivers are considered. The European Union heads of state met in the Portuguese city of Porto on Friday to discuss the bloc's social affairs strategy for the next decade. The bloc was initially opposed to the waiver, arguing that it will undermine incentives for companies to produce jobs in record time in the future. But after the United States announced backing a COVID-19 vaccine patent waiver, several EU member states voiced their tentative support to at least discussing the idea. The World Health Organization and India and South Africa have all called for patents to be temporarily suspended. Speaking after the first day of the EU summit, Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel has said the European Union had exported much of its own production and that the United States should follow ahead.
Europe has always exported a large part of its production to the world, and this should therefore also become the rule, so to speak. The issue of patents, of course, plays a central role, and I have made it clear again that I do not believe that lifting patents is the solution to making vaccines available to more people.
French President Emmanuel Macron has also urged the United States to find an end to the de facto ban on coronavirus vaccine exports. Macron says that stopping the export ban is the key to producing vaccines quickly for all the poor and middle-income countries.
We must therefore work to ensure that this vaccine is a global public good. What does that mean? Firstly, to produce more. I call on the United States of America very clearly to put an end to export bans, not only on vaccines, but on components of those vaccines that prevent production. Today we have CureVac telling us we cannot produce a vaccine in Europe. In any case, we will be blocked because components are blocked from the US. The key to producing vaccines quickly for all poor and middle-income countries is to produce more. Lift export bans. Lift.
The European Union has sealed a deal with BioNTech Pfizer for up to 1.8 billion extra doses of its COVID-19 vaccine. The contract, on top of the 600 million Pfizer doses the Commission has already secured, aims to supply the bloc with enough jabs for booster shots.
Included the negotiations with BioNTech Pfizer for a new contract looking forward to the years 22 and 23. The new contract secures 1.8 billion doses of vaccines, mainly because there are three more topics that are clear for us we have to cover with potential vaccines.
The EU and India have agreed to relaunch a long-stalled trade talks in a major push to boost ties on the second day of the EU summit in Portugal as the COVID-19 pandemic continues battering the South Asian country.
We have resumed our human rights dialogue after 8 years, and this is very good news, because human rights, gender equality, and equal opportunities are at the heart of our engagement with India. And pure security cooperation is growing in many areas, from securing maritime routes to combating terrorism and fighting cybercrime. Today, we showed the strength of the EU-India relationship and its great potential.
It is a landmark moment, and indeed we have agreed that we will resume the negotiations on a free trade agreement. If you just keep in mind that free trade agreement negotiations started in 2007, have been stopped in 2013, and nothing happened in between, and now they are being resumed. It shows the importance of this summit.
In the United States, a shooting between two groups at a South Florida shopping mall have left 3 people injured. Aventura police said the two groups of people had begun fighting in a mall when shots rang out, with both sides using guns and firing at each other. The police added that the injuries were not life-threatening to the 3 people who were hurt. Authorities had several suspects in custody who were being questioned by detectives. Police had no immediate report on what sparked off the fight and the shooting.
We have 3 people who are injured, not life-threatening. They're being attended to right now at local hospitals. We have several individuals that have been involved in the affray in custody. Our main subject, the main shooter, is not in custody. We are still looking for him, not on the property though. The property is secured. We do not have an active shooter situation. We are clearing the property though. All employees and all patrons are being asked to leave the mall. We're asking anybody with plans to come to the mall not to come to the property. You'll be turned away until further notice.
The fossilized remains of 9 Neanderthal men had been found in a cave in Italy. All the individuals found in the Guattari cave located on the coast between Rome and Naples are believed to be adults, although one might have been a child. 8 of them date to between 50,000 and 68,000 years ago, while the oldest could be 90,000 or 100,000 years old. The cave had been closed off by an ancient landslide, preserving everything inside. Recent excavations have also found thousands of animal bones. They are believed to have been brought back to the cave to eat or store as food. Nepali climber Kami Rita Sherpa has reached the summit of Mount Everest for the 25th time, breaking his own record for the most summits of the highest mountain in the world. Sherpa was part of a 12-member team, the first of hundreds of climbers expected to reach to the top of Everest in the coming weeks. A guide for more than 2 decades, Sherpa first summited the 8,848-meter peak in 1994 when working for a commercial expedition, and since then he has climbed Everest almost every year. Nepal's tourism industry suffered a devastating blow last year when the pandemic prompted a complete shutdown of its summits, costing millions in lost revenue. Climbers are now required to show a negative test for the coronavirus before heading to the mountain, but over the last week, dozens of positive cases were reported in base camps. And we come to the end of this news brief. You can find this and many other stories in our website at telesurenglish.net. And don't forget to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.